Hello, everyone, and welcome to Words from Behind the Desk, presented by Arwani Law Firm. My name is Vakairafai, and I am joined today by a very special guest. We have Bernice Bird, who is an Esquire, a former therapist, and now she is a lawyer practicing in family law. And now she is going to come on the show and give us her incredible expertise on narcissism. Before we bring her on, guys, please don't forget, if this is your first time seeing us, please go ahead and like us, love us, comment, stay with us. This show is for you. We're trying to give you as much value as possible. If you are joining us again, we appreciate so much your time, your support. Please make sure you like this video, share it with a friend, comment with us. We'll take any of your questions or comments throughout this live. And let's go ahead and bring on Miss Bernice Bird. Hello, Bernice.
Hi.
How
Thanks for
are you
having me.
today? I'm so glad we were able to make this work. I'm super excited to have you on just because we've been talking now, I think it's been an hour altogether, and I have just been soaking up all of the information that you have been giving, and I think it is so valuable. And so I want to just start out with, we're going to have a conversation today about narcissism, but I want to see what is narcissism? Like, let's just give a general, what does that even mean? Because you always hear people say, oh, they're narcissistic, or oh, it's probably narcissism. But I feel like it's thrown around so casually. But what is it?
Oh, absolutely. It's completely thrown around really casually. Okay, so narcissism, first off, everyone has a little bit of narcissist in them, right? Because technically, it's self-confidence on a functional side. We have to be self-confident and aware and willing to take care of ourselves before we take care of anyone else. It's kind of like putting on the mask before you put on the mask on someone else. When
Right.
it becomes narcissistic is when our self-confidence goes to a very dysfunctional place. So that's when we need that excessive admiration. We exaggerate our abilities, our accomplishments, all in order to get, again, that admiration that fills, the narcissist's ego or inflated sense of self.
That is, so everybody has a little bit of narcissism and narcissistic tendencies in them. So then how would somebody, how would anybody begin to even identify that that either they could or maybe their partner could have some of these characteristics? Is it patterns? Like, what is it that I would be able to identify to know that I may be dealing with somebody who is narcissistic?
Sometimes the interesting thing about narcissistic personality disorder, because the most accurate way to describe narcissism or narcissistic people is by way of saying narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD for short. So, interestingly, NPD in the clinical psychological community, it shows itself in very different ways depending on the person. So it's not like depression, for example, where you can say, oh, generally a person with depression eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or sleeps too little, and we know that to be symptoms of depression. The person with NPD, however, could be someone who self-isolates, someone who's very extroverted, someone who's very loud about their accomplishments, someone who's a little bit more quiet, someone who's physically aggressive versus someone who's just emotionally abusive. So sometimes the best way, obviously there are 7 criteria first and foremost in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5th version, which is literally like the psychologist's Bible. Okay, that's a big book with all the mental health disorders and all the criteria to assist clinicians in diagnosing. So, for example, people with NPD, there are 7 criteria. You only need 5 of them, but among the most important are a sense of entitlement, inflated sense of self, lack of empathy. All right, is a big one. Envious, people who, again, they need that admiration. They usually feel like they're special. They want to be affiliated only with what they consider to be special institutions or special people. So, if you see those types of qualities, then you may be thinking maybe this person has a cluster of narcissistic traits. The narcissist, the person with NPD, this is the most beautiful person in the room. This is the person who has the perfect thing to say all the time. This is seduction incarnate, and not just sexually. You think about it like that. Think about the person that everyone thinks is hot, gorgeous, someone that you're attracted to in every possible way. And usually, it's interesting, usually there's a very minority of people who will actually stand back and say, hey, this seems a little dysfunctional. No one ever has the perfect thing to say at all times. And sometimes the person who isn't the narcissist, right? The way you could probably tell you're dealing with someone like that, I suppose, is how do you feel? You have to check in with yourself, especially if you're in a relationship, because one of the criteria, or I suppose one of the telltale signs of a person with NPD is how are they in their relationships. So we know that their sense of self is inflated. They need admiration that comes from insecure attachment that's developed in their formative years. So, like, to break it down very easily, when someone's a baby, right, and they cry, then mom or dad or primary caregivers come in and they take care of them.
Right.
You were saying? Were you going to say something?
They run to go get them, like I
They run to go get them, exactly. So then baby learns from a physical, visceral level, oh, hey, I have caregivers who are there for me all the time. It's consistent and predictable. Insecure attachment, according to attachment theory, is either avoidant or ambivalent or disorganized. So avoidant, most important ones I really want to discuss really quickly, avoidant and ambivalent. So avoidant is the anxious one. So like, is he going to call? Oh my God. And the ambivalent one is, very dismissive. I don't even care if he calls. Okay. And these are the people who, in their formative years, for example, this is a baby example. Baby cries and mom and dad or caregivers, maybe they weren't as responsive. So maybe one day they showed up, in 5 minutes, maybe another day it took 2 hours. Usually these are in households where there are other problems going on, like abuse, substance abuse, that sort of thing. So the person with NPD will grow up, start establishing that personality disorder in adolescence and adulthood. And they'll grow up with this narrative in their head that people are unreliable. They're unpredictable. I'm suspicious. How do I fill this void? I'm putting it in the most layperson terms right here, but they'll overcompensate for that void, that ego that was never fostered through through caregivers and relationships, with a narrative of perfection. I need to be perfect. I need to inflate this ego. How do I do it? Through the tools and vehicles of getting that admiration from other people, right? Of manipulating other people, manipulating my surroundings, lying. And with that lack of empathy, because how do you learn empathy? You learn it through, those relationships when you're young, you learn from mom or dad being like, don't hit that person. You know what I mean? Right. The NPD, the person with NPD never learned that. So with that lack of empathy criterion, they learn, or I suppose they realize that in order for me to fill that void, well, what do you know? Let me manipulate the truth. Let me exaggerate my abilities. Let me manipulate my people and get what I want from them. So it's actually kind of fascinating, because from this place of unpredictability, the person with NPD has crafted a world of control in order to make his or her world predictable. And that's where the partner of the narcissist starts to feel like he or she is going a little crazy, because of that need to make things predictable. The narcissist is actually very unpredictable.
Wow. So Bernice, okay, so I'm like listening to you talking, and I'm like, you have such a wealth of knowledge as it pertains to narcissist and narcissism. And I just I have to ask, like, what made you want to kind of niche down and become an expert as it pertains to narcissists, what kind of cultivated that desire in you, because you know a lot.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that comment. Well, let's see. As you know, I used to be a therapist. I was licensed to practice mental health counseling, and I worked with a lot of different populations. First, I was working with children, with autism, adolescents, at-risk youth, adults with anxiety, depression. Eventually, I moved towards working with the population that they were court ordered to go to therapy, either for battery or domestic violence. It was in that population that I was seeing a lot of people with NPD. Why? Because like what I was telling you about the inflated sense of self, people with NPD do not believe that there's anything wrong with them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they don't go to therapy unless everyone is telling them to go to therapy, or unless, you know, the court, the judge
The
is
judge
like,
is telling
you
you,
got to go to therapy.
listen,
Sorry,
listen,
you
you
know.
need some therapy.
That's the only way you're going to see your children, is if you go to therapy for, you know, 8 to 10 weeks. So, you know, that's when I saw the person with NPD. And when you're a therapist, you're working with people, but you can only help them as much as they want to help themselves.
Right.
So I had this person across from me, and they were completely, you know, without remorse. Like, you know, literally, she fell on my fist, you know, so horrible, horrible. So, you know, I left.
What?
Yeah, very unfortunately, very sadly. So I left, not to say that all people with NPD, you know, express that
Totally.
level of remorse,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, sometimes people with NPD have other comorbid disorders, meaning that they have other disorders at the same time as NPD. You know, those particular people in that population I was working at the time, they also had some antisocial tendencies where they relished the opportunity to hurt people or break the law. Some people had, you know, elements of psychotic disorder, so that was, you know, maybe a little bit different. But, you know, you get the idea. They don't go to treatment unless they're ordered to. So
Right.
when I left being a therapist, I, you know, started practicing law. And my experience with narcissists then, at that point, was from across the table. You know, they were my opponents.
Right.
And
Right.
I saw the same type of behavior, but just it manifested in interesting ways during litigation. And I learned how to strategize according to what seems to be the very unpredictable behavior of the narcissist, of the person with NPD. And really, Bridgerton. Bridgerton also very much inspired me
Mm-hmm.
to get into this niche, if you will.
Into this niche. You know, it's so interesting because I always hear, you know, Rania talking, and I know that the Arwani law firm deals a lot with domestic violence cases, you know, and I know that it's a common term that I usually hear come up in conversation, talking to her at the Arwani law firm. So it's interesting to get a deep dive into patterns, traits, you know, and I'm curious to know, as it pertains to litigation, you know, as a lawyer yourself, how can you, because you know, a large majority of our audience are lawyers, and so I want to know if there's anything that you can communicate to them, maybe they're just starting out, to know if they are dealing with somebody in the opposing counsel that possibly is narcissistic, or just what kind of advice would you give to somebody who feels, yes, I think I'm dealing with a narcissist. How do I move forward to create the best scenario possible for all the parties involved?
It's definitely, you definitely have to look at a combination of your client's behavior and the opponent's behavior. So I'll just address pro se opponent's behavior in determining whether he or she may, you know, show some trace of narcissism. So if you start a case, let's say you're filing the petition. In this case, you know, we're talking about family law, petition for dissolution of marriage. You're filing on behalf of client, and you serve opposing party. Opposing party, if he or she is in fact someone who should be diagnosed with NPD, or at least shows a cluster, a sufficient amount of traits that would make someone, you know, a worrisome amount of traits to make them a narcissist, right?
Mm-hmm.
That person will remain pro se for a significant amount of time, a certain amount of time that definitely makes it uncomfortable and difficult for the attorney. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because he or she has an inflated sense of self, entitlement. They exaggerate their abilities. They believe that they can learn anything on the fly, and they do not need professional help. So, as the
Wow.
opposing counsel, you will be attempting communication, you know, relentlessly, attempting to receive disclosure, serving this person over and over again with motions, what have you, you know, to compel compliance, you name it. And this pro se opponent, if he or she truly does have NPD, will not respond, will be flippant about it. And it isn't until something big happens, such as, let's say you're in the disclosure process, the discovery process, you discover something that you know you are able to impeach the person. Like, let's say you're in disclosure and you find out, you know, hey, you have 2 bank accounts that you never disclosed. We caught you. It's right here. That's when you have popped the very delicate balloon, the inflated sense of self of the narcissist, okay? And that's when the incident, will occur, and he or she will go ahead and hire someone. All right. So then, if you're dealing with a male opponent, usually a homosexual, excuse me, a heterosexual cisgender male, if that's what you're dealing with on the other side, he's going to go ahead and hire a young female attorney. Every time he or she will hire okay, if it's a male, he will hire a young female, someone that he perceives to be not experienced, which may or may not be the truth. This person could be very, very capable, but he will perceive this young female to be inexperienced. He will also go ahead and hire this female thinking, well, she's a female, she's going to fall susceptible to my charm and my seduction, so I will be able to control her. I will also be able to hide behind the esquire and cause the fear in this opposing party, thereby having control and being able to create this predictability in the relationship that is now the legal relationship.
Wow.
So it is the same mechanisms that you see in the personal relationship, just generalized in the legal relationship.
Right.
So it's not as close, it's not as personal, but you still see it. So as the attorney, you have to be the strong one, right? Because this guy, if we're talking about a cisgender, heterosexual man, your client is the wife, he's using this young female attorney, he's driving her crazy, and she has no other choice but to zealously represent her client because she has to, Your client is going to be, very seemingly erratic. She won't actually be erratic, but she will be reacting to this man. So she's going to be texting you, emailing, calling, probably at all hours, Saturdays, being like, he said this, could this actually happen? And right. You have to be the strong one, not mean, but you have to be the stable one and show her, listen, this person, he is in the business of breaching boundaries. He's in the business of control. We are now trying to start your new life, and your new life is all about independence and controlling your boundaries. And this is where we start.
That's good. That's good. And I know that, I would never suggest anybody to, self-diagnose themselves or to diagnose their partner based off of a conversation that they heard between me and you, but however, I do want to know if if somebody does feel, for instance, that they could be dealing with a narcissist, what would you communicate them? Having been a therapist, you've dealt with the personality and have a wealth of knowledge, what would you communicate to an individual that is seeing this and it's sparking something and they're wondering and a little bit curious, is it possible that I'm in a relationship with a narcissist? Because a lot of the things that she's saying kind of are pain points within my relationship.
Yeah, like they echo in their chambers. Mm-hmm. So, first and foremost, obviously, you can't advise legally,
right,
from far away. You cannot diagnose from far away, especially if you don't have a license. So that's first and foremost. So, and because like what I was saying earlier, it's very, there is very limited data on how someone with NPD looks like because it manifests differently across the board. It's difficult to pull out something. There's very limited research showing how it looks like. So it's difficult to pull up something scientific and say, okay, well, that does look like my husband. The best thing to do, honestly, is to check in with yourself. How do you feel? Because a lot of times the relationship, the personal relationship, the romantic relationship, or even actually, honestly, the familial relationship with someone with NPD mimics one of abuse, of domestic violence. So some people may accompany that erratic behavior with physical abuse. Some of them may just be emotional, verbal abuse. They feel like it's whatever, but it's still very painful. Right. And obviously, it's characterized by interchanging very drastic affection, sentiments of love. I love you. You're perfect. You're like a calendar girl. I can't live without you. You are wonderful. And then, immediately, and then 2 hours later, or literally like the next day, I'm not sure if I'm in love with you. You know what? You should go to the gym. You should tighten it up. Things like that really, put the partner, sweep him or her off her feet in a bad way. And it's very similar to the domestic violence cycle where you have the incident, and then after that you have the calm, where nothing is happening. Literally, that is the point where the victim is trying to get her senses, or his senses, very much like how I was just describing. Then
Right.
there's the reconciliation phase, where in this case, the person with NPD is like, you know what, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. But the apology is usually conditional. So in doing that conditional apology, the person with NPD is also gaslighting the partner. And gaslighting, we hear that all the time, right? You know, Donald Trump is gaslighting everyone. The gaslighting is really saying, you know, it was your idea that this thing happened, even though honestly it was the other person's idea.
Right.
So
Right.
during that reconciliation phase, the partner is probably thinking, wow, you know what? Maybe I do need to tighten it up. Who knows? You know? So for example, after that, then there's the tension building, where there could be, you know, more miscommunications on something that you believe to be fact, and then bam, the domestic violence incident. So again, I think if anything, rather than trying to find in Google, you know, information or evidence on what is narcissism or NPD, what does that look like, probably look more into domestic violence. What is that? What does that look like? Whether it's verbal, emotional, physical, because the cycle, you know, whether it's just physical, right? It's very similar to narcissistic abuse. Abuse is abuse.
Abusive.
And
Yeah.
how you feel, and how you feel is probably more indicative of whether or not you're with that kind of partner than can you actually pinpoint, does this person need excessive admiration, et cetera, et cetera.
That's so good. Thank you so much, Bernice. My
You're
goodness,
welcome.
you gave us like so much information. I appreciate it so much. Guys, if you are looking for more information, or if you have a question or a comment, or just, you know, just want to look into Miss Bernice. Oh my gosh, I choked. This is live, guys. I apologize. You guys, please, if you're looking for more expertise, have a question or a comment, you can visit birdlawfirmpa.com. And Bernice, I know that they can find you on Facebook, Instagram. Is there anywhere else that they should know that they can find you? Because if you're just like me and want to get as much information as possible in 2021,
I'm
you're
everywhere. You can find me also on
everywhere.
LinkedIn. I'm everywhere. You can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Everywhere. Remember, again, it's birdlawfirmpa.com. Bernice, I appreciate so much your time and your education today on narcissism and narcissists.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful.
Guys, remember, if you are looking for more information, please follow Bernice Bird on all of the social platforms everywhere. If you have a question or comment specifically for Arwani Law Firm, you can always email us at manager@arwanilawfirm.com. Please remember, share this. We look forward to seeing you guys next week. And until next week, we hope you guys stay safe. Have a wonderful rest